Date Alive is a series that has spanned multiple formats, starting in light novels, expanding to anime, and even into games. Unfortunately, we've never had the privilege of an English translation for these games. Until now. Date Alive Rio Reincarnation is not just one, not two, but three visual novel games all wrapped in one sweet little package. So a major positive straight out the gate is that you're getting your money's worth with this one. I'd say all up, this is about 50 to 60 hours worth of content, assuming you want to play through all the routes. At its heart, as the name implies, this game has one clear focus: dating. While many visual novels tend to skirt the lines between story and dating somewhat evenly, Date Alive is definitely a game that's more fitting in the dating simulator category, as the majority of its focus is solely about reaching the endgame, a date with the selected character. Unlike a lot of these games, the story doesn't just abruptly end when the characters fall in love either. You'll actually go on a date with them and have to make sure it goes well. You're dealing with spirits who have a tendency to go berserk after all, so pissing them off might just get you killed. Much like real life. But all this isn't to say it doesn't have anything in the way of story. The games continue the story from the light novel series. If you haven't read them or watched the anime series, that's alright, because the game has a brief catch-up of the relevant details for the series. It's not quite in-depth enough to completely familiarise yourself, but it's definitely a helpful tool that will allow the uninitiated to jump in without worry. The overarching narrative for the games is an original story and it is enjoyable, plus it has some great combat sequences, but it's important to note that it takes a bit of a backseat to the dating aspects of this game. The first game is the most guilty of this. It only really has the bulk of its story in the true route, but the collection improves its story with each game, offering more and more with each iteration. The final game is the best narrative-wise, as it shifts to be more story conclusion than dating, so if you play visual novels for the storytelling, you should be prepared to be patient with Date Alive, and really just be aware that it isn't the priority here. As anyone familiar with this type of visual novel can guess, this game does include a lot of sexual themes. This is definitely not the type of game you want to play with family in the room, because the panty shots, cleavage, and suggestive imagery like sucking on a dick-shaped popsicle are all very constant. In fact, it includes enough that Sony felt the need to censor some of the CGs, so if that's something that makes a difference to you, be sure to get the uncensored version on Steam. As you can see in the video, the art in this game uses living imagery, meaning there's a lot of movement, emoting, and jiggling. I'm not usually a fan of the living imagery used in some visual novels. I can appreciate the creativity, but a common problem for me is that the characters just kind of loop through their unvarying movements while you read, which has always felt inorganic to me. But Date Alive seems to be somewhat conscious of this problem and opts for movements that are a lot more simple and realistic. Without the over-the-top movements and jiggling, it's not as easy to tell where the animation loops, so it doesn't feel like you're just watching some lame internet gif, and I think that really sets Date Alive apart from the other visual novels that have attempted this. The characters for this trilogy also follow the standard of being unique but not over the top, which to me seems like a blessing and a curse. I think we've all played a harem-style visual novel or two where each character has a clearly identifiable trope and every interaction with that character serves to push that trope, so it's a nice change with Date Alive because while the characters do still fall into these tropes, they're far more subtle than most other games. Interactions with characters serve to push that character's personality rather than select a trope, which doesn't sound like all that much of a difference, but believe me, when you've seen the same tropes dozens of times, it's certainly a nice change to see a game that tries things even slightly different. For an example of what I mean, the character's Toko is more or less the airhead type, not usually understanding the things around her, saying silly things at silly times, etc. But the game doesn't spend a whole route just establishing this fact by pushing her airheadedness at all times. Most of the time it's just actual conversation that sometimes stems off into airheadedness, sometimes causing events like when she accidentally gets lost. I found this to be very refreshing, but as I mentioned, it's a bit of a blessing and a curse, because while it may be refreshing on a singular route, when you're going through half a dozen routes for 3 separate games, the higher amount of normalcy can start to blend together a bit, which isn't helped by the fact that the characters do mostly fall under the umbrella of the young, wide-eyed girl archetype with little to no womanly personality traits. Overall, Date Alive is a series of games that cater to a very specific clientele. The story is present, the setting is well established, and the browsable map creates a sense of unity with the town and its inhabitants as a whole. But if the dating aspects of the game are something that don't interest you at all, then it may be a bit difficult for you to swallow. But conversely, if the dating aspects are something that do interest you, you'll find a strong backbone made of varying routes and dates to whet your appetite, bolstered strongly by lovable characters, an interesting setting, and a nice conclusive ending for the series.